Hello everybody and welcome to this video on Section B of the AQA GCSE English and English Language exams. This video will give you a whistle-stop tour of the two writing questions that you'll have to do in Section B, and we'll discuss what you need to include in each of those questions in order to get the most marks that you can. So I haven't actually uploaded the specific mark schemes for this. I've tried to write it in as concise a way as I can. But basically, in order to get the most marks on these two writing tasks, you have to show the examiner that you can paragraph correctly, that you can use a variety of punctuation, that you can use interesting vocabulary, that your grammar is correct, that you can use a variety of sentence structures, that you've written in the correct format. That might be a letter, a speech, or it could be an article. And that you can use linguistic features such as read my rules or De Forest techniques. So you need to be able to do all of those things in order to get into the top mark scheme bands for that. So you have two writing questions on Section B. You've got a shorter writing task which will ask you to write to inform, explain or describe, and that's worth 16 marks. And you have a longer writing task which will ask you to write to argue, persuade or advise, which is worth 24 marks. Okay, so let's go to question 6 first. Now the reason why I've done this one before question 5 is because my tip for you would be to do this one before question 5. So in my top tips video, which you may have already watched, I actually give you the tip of perhaps doing the exam back to front and doing the writing tasks first before the reading. Now the reason why I say that is because these questions are worth loads more marks than some of the reading questions at the beginning of the exam paper. Now if you don't want to do that, that's fine, but what I would say is if you're going to do the reading section first, when you get to the writing, make sure you do question 6 before question 5. Question 6 is worth 24 marks, which is worth more than a quarter of the whole exam. So it's definitely worth taking the time to do this question properly. If need be, if your timing is slightly off, you can rush the next question, which is question 5, more easily than you can rush this one. So question 6 is worth 24 marks and you have 35 minutes to do it. So what I would advise you to do would be to spend 5 minutes planning, 25 minutes writing and then 5 minutes checking. Likewise for question 5, this is worth less marks. It's still worth 16 marks though. Spend 5 minutes planning, 15 minutes writing and 5 minutes checking because you have 25 minutes in total for this question. Okay, so thinking about punctuation, my tip to you would be to try and use at least 5 different types of punctuation in both of those writing tasks. So an easy way to remember all of your different types of punctuation is punctuation pool. It's just a visual way of remembering all those different types. You're definitely going to use full stops, commas, apostrophes. Use a rhetorical question and you'd use a question mark, and use an exclamation mark if you wanted to show surprise, excitement, or you wanted to hammer home a point. That's 5 already. Perhaps you could use a colon to start a list, a bullet point list, or a semicolon also in your bullet point list. A dash for a dramatic pause, or if you've got a quotation, perhaps you could make up a quotation from somebody, maybe a scientist, if you wanted to back up a fact, then you could use speech marks there as your quotation. So there are lots of different ways you can use your punctuation, but make sure you use at least 5 types in each of your writing tasks. Your paragraphs need to be varied, and when I say that, I mean vary the length of your paragraphs. Try starting your answer with a 1-sentence paragraph. So if you're writing an article, then you would automatically have a subheading, and that normally is just 1 sentence. Also, if you think about it, if you're writing a letter, your introduction might just be 1 sentence. So try starting it with a 1-sentence paragraph and then vary the lengths of your paragraphs as you go through. If you're unsure about when to change paragraphs, remember tip top. So you change paragraph when you change the time, the topic, the place, or the person. Okay, sentence structure, you need to show the examiner that you are able to write using a variety of different sentence structures. So definitely on your tick list you need to get a one-word sentence in there. That will 9 times out of 10 be a verb. So you could have stop, think, listen, look. So it's something you want the reader to do. Compound sentences are two simple sentences together and they're joined with and, but, or because. You will automatically use those in your writing, so you don't even need to really think about those. And the biggie is complex sentences. Now I've got a list on here of all of the different ways that you can write a complex sentence. So you can start with 2 adjectives, start with an ly word, which is an adverb, start with an ing word, end with an ing word. Sandwich technique is where you have an embedded subordinate clause, start with a prepositional phrase such as over in the corner, start with a conjunction, end with a conjunction, and you could also use a simile, which would also be a complex sentence. So try and get at least 5 different types of complex sentences within your writing and tick them off as you go in your plan. So you need to show the examiner that you can move your subordinate clause, which is the part of the complex sentence that doesn't make sense without the first bit. So try putting your subordinate clause at the beginning of your sentence and also try putting it at the end. Your linguistic devices now, I have done a whole video on language analysis. So when you do question 3 in the reading section of the examiners are asking you to analyse those language techniques and explain how writers use them. Now in your writing section you are going to be using those language features, so definitely have a look at that video on language analysis and try and use, again, at least 5 different language devices within each of your writing tasks. Okay, so I'm going to look at question 6 first, which asks you to write to argue, persuade or advise, because obviously this is the one that I want you to write first when it comes to the writing section of the paper. So writing to argue is influencing the reader to your point of view using a series of logical reasons. You must acknowledge the other person's point of view. So it's not a balanced argument, it's slightly shifted in your favour, okay, but you need to show the reader that you understand that there is another point of view. So in my plan, I would draw a little table like this and I would do my arguments for, and then I would write my counter arguments, so my arguments against. And I would have 5 because I would want to write at least 5 paragraphs for this with an introduction and a conclusion, so 7 paragraphs in all. So each one of those arguments forms a separate paragraph. And you need to use your read my rules and De Forest techniques within your writing, and you need to sequence your arguments in a logical order using connectives. Now at the end of this video I'm going to show you a little poster and it's got loads of connectives on there, so if you can learn a few of those before the exam then they stand you in good stead, so you'll need to use those connectives in each one of the writing tasks. Now writing to persuade is very similar to writing to argue. You are influencing the reader to your point of view, but this is a completely unbalanced and emotive view, okay? So you can be completely single-minded and opinionated. You don't need to show the examiner that you understand that there is another point of view. So you can be very personal, you can be very passionate and emotional, and you're definitely going to use rhetorical language. So definitely think about using repetition, rhetorical questions, emotive language, facts, opinions. Definitely use anecdotal experience. That's a good one to get in with writing to persuade. So there are loads of different read my rules techniques that you can use for this. Again, remembering that you need to structure each one of your reasons in a logical format, so using your connectives all the way through. Okay, so writing to advise hasn't actually come up on the exam that much, so perhaps it will come up this year, we don't know. But writing to advise is offering advice to the reader on how to do something or a decision that they should make. So if you think about if you were giving advice to one of your friends, you would be making suggestions to them on what to do, and you'd also give them reasons as to why they should do it. So you need to be assertive, but you need to be doing it in a way that makes you feel like you are a friend to them. Okay, so you might use phrases like, you ought to do this, or you should do this. Okay, so you need to make it clear that you're offering them suggestions and that they are good suggestions. So giving reasons for why they should do what you're telling them to do. So again, thinking about Read My Rules and your De Forest techniques, your punctuation and your sentence structure. Okay? Right, so that was question 6, and now this is question 5. So question 6 is done and out of the way. We've got 25 minutes left to spend on question 5. And question 5 will ask you to write to inform, explain or describe. So writing to inform is to give factual information to another person. So it goes without saying that the main De Forest and Read My Rules techniques that we're going to use are facts and opinions. But we might also use things like repetition or address the reader. We might use lists of things if we were producing a factual list of ideas or things that we wanted to tell the reader. And typical phrases that you could use within writing to inform are those listed on the right-hand side. So if you want to pause the video, have a read through them now. I'm not going to spend time going through them because I'm very aware that this video could go on forever. So pause the video and have a look through those now. So writing to explain, you need to be thinking about the question why. Okay, so when you explain something, you are explaining why that thing happens or why it happened when it did or where it happened. So again, you've got the same linguistic devices used for writing to inform, but you're thinking about the word because, okay? So instead of just telling the reader or informing the reader, perhaps let's think, what's your favourite chocolate bar? You might inform them that your favourite chocolate bar is a Snickers. But if you're writing to explain, you would be saying, my favourite chocolate bar is a Snickers because I like the chewy caramel and the nuts. Okay, so you need to be thinking about that word because. So you're explaining why, what, where or when. So you're asking questions in your mind and answering them for the reader. Okay, now finally writing to describe. Now this is very different to writing to inform and explain, and you're going to be using very different linguistic devices for these. So with writing to inform, we always use the senses. We call it painting a picture in your reader's mind with the words that you use. So imagine that you are a video camera and you are recording what you can see, hear, taste, touch and smell in front of you. And your reader can't see that thing, but they can only read what you've written. So you need to be really, really clear on what you can see, hear, taste, touch and smell to create that vivid picture in your reader's mind. So we do that by using adjectives and adverbs. So those are your main devices. So you want to be using lots of really interesting adjectives to describe what you can see, hear, taste, touch and smell. And you're also going to be using figurative language. So lots of similes, metaphors, personification to describe the place it could be, or the person, or the topic that you've been asked to describe. Also, you want to be using alliteration and assonance. Okay, so all of those linguistic devices for writing to describe, very different from writing to inform or explain. Now, for both writing tasks, you will be asked to write in a specific format. So what you've got in front of you right now is a template for each one of those formats. So if you're asked to write a web page or a newspaper article or a leaflet, you always start with a headline, then a subheadline, an introduction, then you go into more detail with probably 3 paragraphs for the shorter writing tasks and 5 paragraphs for the longer writing task, and then a conclusion. Then you've got the template for a description, the template for a letter, and the template for a speech. And this writing templates PDF is available to download from my website. Just head over to aceyourexams.wordpress.com. So definitely have a look at that and remember those different templates. There has been a question in the past and it asked you to write a blog. I would say stick with the template of a newspaper article if it asks you to write a blog. A blog is just an online diary, so again you would have a headline and a subheadline for that. So if it asks you to write a blog, which it might do, then remember the template for a newspaper article. And like I said earlier in the video, you need to make sure that you structure all of your points, structure your paragraphs in a logical order, and you can do that using discourse markers. So I've got another little handout which is available on my website too. You can download this. So try and remember 2 or 3 different discourse markers from each of the different varieties. So each of the different columns in the table. So 3 from furthering arguments and then 3 from each of the others. Okay? Make sure that you remember those. You will need to use those to show the examiner that you've structured your answer clearly. Okay, so in conclusion, this has been a whistle-stop tour of questions 5 and 6, but please do remember to allow time for planning and checking your work. I know you might be thinking, but planning and checking, it takes up time, I don't have enough time to write the answer. But you will regret it if you do not check through your work. It's very easy to make simple little mistakes when you are under pressure. So allow that 5 minutes planning to logically organise your reasons or arguments in your answer. Otherwise, it's not going to be structured. Make sure within your plan that you plan for when you use your punctuation. So where are you going to use your different punctuation? And also plan for using your linguistic devices. So what linguistic devices are you going to use and which paragraphs are you going to use them in? I would say do question 6 before question 5. I think it makes logical reasoning, I suppose, in order to do that. It makes sense to do the bigger mark question before the smaller mark one. So do question 6 before question 5. And I suppose the biggie, the most important tip I have for you is make sure you read the question properly. Some candidates, I think, get a little bit flustered in the exam and they end up writing an answer to a question that doesn't exist. So make sure you read the question, figure out what your type of text is. So what type of text are they asking you to write? Is it a letter, a news article, a speech? Think about who your audience is. So who are you writing for? You're going to use very different language to teenagers than to counsellors at your local council. So definitely think about your audience and think about the purpose. Why are you writing it? Okay, make sure you underline your TAP, your text, audience and purpose in your question before you start planning. Okay, so I wish you the very best of luck with this exam. I'm sure you will breeze through. Please let me know if there's any more I can do. If you've got any questions about the exam, you can tweet me. Just follow Miss W, okay? Just at aceyourexams on Twitter, okay? If you've got any other questions, you can email me. That's through my website. Just head over to aceyourexams.wordpress.com. Good luck and best wishes.